We will never be more motivated to learn or retain more of what we've learned than what we've determined to learn ourselves. For the last 30 years, I have dedicated my life to the scholarship and practice of educational futuring. Now, like most educational futurists, I'm not looking at a crystal ball to try to predict something in the future. But what I am interested in is determining what we need to do to focus on so that we know that education will continue to evolve with the way that the world works and learns. And as a part of that journey, I've discovered that the plight of most students is that they have a very hard time connecting what they're learning to something that they're interested in. And this happens in every level of education, from kindergarten all the way through professional development. And most students just have a really hard time self-determining what's important in learning. I want you to think back to elementary school. Do you remember that? For some of you, the playground was the best part of the whole day, right? Do you remember the seesaw? Maybe some of you may have called it a teeter-totter, but do you remember it? Well, for those of you that don't, it was like a steel bar that had seats on either side, and one kid would get over here, another kid would get over here, and then it would sit on this hinge point called a fulcrum, and it would rock back and forth like this, right? And I was always larger than all the other kids, so when I got on one side and one of my skinny friends got on the other, up it would go, and then they would be dangling their feet, and I would be down at the bottom, right? And it would take 2 or 3 of my friends to get on board on the other side to balance out the weight. But then, in high school physics, we learned about something amazing. We learned that fulcrum point was another opportunity to balance that seesaw. That you didn't have to pile up the weight on one side, but all you had to do was move the fulcrum toward the weight, and like some sort of scientific magic trick, it would just balance, and the seesaw would work. Now, I want you to keep that thought in mind because we're going to apply it to education. Because you see, education is very much like a seesaw. On one side of the seesaw are all the things that are unknown and need to be known, and on the other side are all the things we already know. Immediately, you can begin to understand, right, that all the things that are unknown and need to be known feel heavier than or out of balance with the things that I already know. And so for most students, what that means is we're just going to start piling up information on the other side to try to balance out the seesaw, and we really have no connection to why we're doing that, other than just to strike this balance that nobody really can define what that means or not. But in physics, if we remember our physics lesson, there's a better way. What if the student could understand the gravity of what they're learning and then build the skill set to be able to move that fulcrum toward the things that they don't know because they found a way to attach it to something that they're interested in? Now, they would be more motivated to make that connection, to move that fulcrum, and then to start to find value in what they're learning. Because here's the critical piece that I don't want you to miss. And that is that every student needs to find value in what they're learning. It's true for every student. And that value is internal. It's not external. The value cannot be put on us. It has to come from within us. I want to do a thought experiment right now. This will be fun, and there's no quiz, so don't worry. I want you to think about the answer to this question right now. I'm going to ask you a question. I just want you to think about the answer. What is your favorite thing to study? Now, you probably almost immediately came up with an answer to something, or you came up to maybe a range of things that you love to study, and that's okay too. Why is that? Why do we come up with an answer to that question so fast? Well, because we value what resonates within us, but not just what we do, who we are. Listen, after over 30 years of being in education and being involved in literally every form of education imaginable in many different industries, and having grown up in a family full of educators, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you were to ask me that question, hey Tim, what's your favorite thing to study? I would answer without hesitation, jazz, hands down. But my love of jazz is not just connected to the music itself and the different musical theories that are involved, but jazz embodies an improvisational ideology that's best summed up in the words of the great Miles Davis when he said, quote, "A note is only wrong based on the note that follows it," unquote. You see, that idea is fundamental to how jazz works. And it also deeply resonates with not just what I do, but who I am. You see, because the more that I study jazz, the more the reality is that jazz creates an environment, an intellectual environment of innovation for me. And the more I study it, the more I become more authentically myself. You see, because consider this, you're always going to seek out to learn things. You always seek out to learn the things that make you feel like they're resonating with who you are, not just what you do. And then you can start to self-determine the value of what you're learning. Therefore, taking away the plight of most students where they don't feel like it's very valuable. So this idea of assigning value or self-determining value in what you're learning, it has a name. It's called hudiggoi. And it's probably the best answer to how we can actually create lifelong learners, which is and always has been the ultimate goal of education. Now, there may be some in this room who have heard of the educational term pedagogy, which is an educational term that means how children learn or how we teach children. It comes from the same Latin word as pediatrics, pedagogy. There's another word that's lesser known called andragogy, which is how adults learn and how we teach adults. But hudiggoi is a word that hardly anybody has ever heard. But yet, ironically, all of you, including myself, utilize it every day because, in effect, it's how we teach and learn ourselves. Let me give you a couple of examples of hudiggoi in action. Have you ever gone to the internet to find a recipe because you just really love to cook? Have you ever taken a lesson to improve your golf swing? Did that work? Yeah, that's what I thought. Have you ever gone to the local hardware store for like a do-it-yourself presentation on how to put tile in your bathroom or your kitchen? Have you ever read a book on how to do sales closings because you wanted to increase your numbers at work? All of those are hudiggogically implemented strategies where you determined what you needed to know and the value of that knowledge and then sought out how to learn it. No one had to tell you. There was nothing external about it. It was all internal. Here's an old school one for all you old schoolers out there. Have you ever read the liner notes of an album to find out more about your favorite artist or band or why they did this album? Or here's one that you may be surprised by. Most medical schools are built on hudiggogical principles. It's true. Most medical students, the idea is they can self-rely, self-determine, self-resource their own learning. So the next time you go to the doctor, consider this. You're probably being told something that they taught themselves. You see, hudiggoi works because we are extremely good at determining what we need to know, even though we come to a situation where we know a lot already. And let's face it, we're always going to find ourselves in a situation where we're going to be able to determine what we need to know and then figure out how we're going to resource that for ourselves. And so the idea here is that we always want to keep pressing forward to make sure that we can continue to do that, continue to find value in what we're learning. So how do we do that? How do we continue to drive value into each student, whatever they're studying, even when that study could be compulsory? How do we do that? Well, hudiggoi provides us 3 pathways. First, hudiggoi provides us a pathway to autonomy, Students need to feel like they can connect what they're interested in with what they're learning. And that's true at any age, and that can be applied to any kind of learning, whether you choose the learning or whether that learning is compulsory. Think of a student who has to practice counting to 50 and counts their crayons because they just love to color. And so now it's not about the counting at all. Now it's about attaching the counting to something that they love. Hudiggoi provides us with opportunities of discovery. It's a pathway to discover. Have you ever been on the internet and you found yourself going down a rabbit hole? You were looking up something else, then suddenly you spend 3 hours looking at something else and you're all bought in, buying all kinds of stuff, looking at it, reading other articles. You trace yourself into places you never knew you could. Then you're talking about it with your friends the next day and you're thinking about it for a week. Discovery is an incredibly powerful way to learn things. And by the way, you'll very rarely forget what you learn when you discover it that way. Hudiggoi provides us pathways of resonance. Now, all of you in this room probably, and anyone watching this probably, has taken a 2-liter bottle and blown into it and made a sound. And then many of you probably have dumped some of the liquid out, or maybe you drank it, and then you blew into it again and it made a deeper sound. Because as we remove the liquid, there's more resonance in the bottle. And in that very same way, the more that we open up our minds to be able to learn new things, the more those ideas resonate within us. And so consider this. Are you seeing the picture? That, let me say what I said in the beginning a little bit different. You will never be more motivated to learn or retain more of what you've learned than what you learn through autonomy, discovery, and resonance. And that's true of any age student doing any kind of education, whether that education is compulsory or not. So listen, as technology continues to change and shape our culture, especially in the various forms of education, I just want you to remember something. There will always be concepts and ideas on one side of the seesaw that are unknown and need to be known. And there will always be concepts and ideas on the other side of the seesaw that we already know. And Hudiggoi is going to allow you to explore all of those things. But now it's not just going to be about balancing the seesaw like we did before. Now the focus can be on the student, forming that student as a fulcrum that can balance not just one learning seesaw, but a whole world of learning seesaws that can teach us a whole universe of ideas and concepts that are all interconnected and deeply resonating with who we are and what we do. So remember, you will never be more motivated to learn or retain more of what you've learned than what you've determined to learn yourself. So I'll leave you with this. What do you want to learn next?